The parking lot of Riverside Galleria was a kind of silence that wasn't real silence. It was that artificial emptiness, made up of distant engines, doors banging on some level above, the insistent hum of fluorescent lights, and the metallic sound of shopping carts that someone had left behind without returning. It was early evening. The sky still held a remnant of blue, but down there, between concrete pillars and painted lines on the ground, the light already had the pale and impersonal color of a place where no one should linger too long. Claire Monrocha was walking with a paper bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. Nothing about her stood out at first glance. Dark jeans, simple sneakers, a short jacket. Her hair tied up in a bun that seemed more for practicality than style. If someone passed by her, they would only see another woman returning home after what was probably a long day. And Claire liked that. She liked being just another one. She didn't stop to look at her cell phone. She didn't adjust her shoulder bag. She didn't make the automatic gesture of pressing the alarm button every 2 steps, like so many people did without realizing it. She walked as if she were going to the car, but her eyes worked like a discreet scanner. 2 cars parked with tinted windows, engines off. A man near the main elevator, pretending to tamper with a payment machine. A couple arguing, their body language suggesting they're paying no attention to anything else. A camera in the corner, with a red light on to bright, almost theatrical, which sometimes meant fake camera. The fire escape in the background, with a door that didn't close properly. The corridor leading to Sector C, where the lighting flickered at predictable intervals. She counted steps to her car, and in the middle of that count, felt something that wasn't exactly fear. It was a tug, a slight change in the air, as if the environment had suddenly decided to pay attention to her. Claire paused for a second, as if she had remembered something inside her bag. The trick was simple: stop before the car, because the instant someone opens the door is the most vulnerable moment. She turned her body just enough to turn the bag into an excuse and, incidentally, change the angle of her field of vision. That's when he saw it. Between a white SUV and a black sedan, a shadow shifted. It wasn't a rush. It was economy of movement. The shadow didn't come as if trying to attract attention, but as if certain that no one was watching. Claire felt her own heart race, but she wouldn't let it turn into panic. Panic was noise. She couldn't make noise. She took 2 more steps, still some distance from the car, and squeezed the remote in her hand not to unlock it, but to turn on the vehicle's lights. The silver Corolla responded with a short flash and an internal glow. The small burst of light better highlighted the surrounding lines. The shadow hesitated. A second. Half a second, perhaps. Claire breathed through her nose, controlling her rhythm. Her hand on the key remained loose, as if she weren't thinking. She turned her face toward the elevator, as if she were waiting for someone. And then she spoke, loud enough for an observer to believe it was a speakerphone call, but not too loud. "I'm coming down now. I'm on B3. Yes, near column 17. The man near the payment machine raised his head for a moment. The couple did not. The parking lot remained the parking lot. The shadow resumed its movement. Now the outline of a thin, hooded male body was visible. His posture gave him away. His weight shifted forward, as if he were about to advance, but wanted to retreat quickly. The distance was closing. Claire did something that many people didn't do. She walked away from the car. 1 step to the side, then another. Whoever tries to rob someone expects the victim to be trapped between the car and the assailant, with the reflex to protect the door, the purse, the keys. She didn't offer that. She made space. He really showed up, as if he had realized there was no longer any advantage in staying hidden. "Hey," he said, his voice trying to sound firm but hurried inside. "Miss, hand over your purse." Claire stood still, not because she froze, because she chose to stay still. She examined his hand. It was near his sweatshirt pocket. He could be holding something, a knife, a replica, the real gun. She had no way of knowing, and to her, that didn't matter as much as what he wanted to believe. She tilted her head, making as little expression as possible. Neither defiance nor fear. "Are you alone?" she asked, as if it were a stupid question. He frowned. "What? Are you alone here?" He repeated unequivocally. "Because if not, I'd rather not get involved." He took a step, annoyed, as if that answer had thrown him off script. Stop messing around. Your purse and your cell phone. Now. Claire slowly raised her left hand, showing the paper bag. I only have this and the key. My cell phone is in my inside pocket. If I take it out, you'll think I'm doing something else. The thief looked around, too quickly. That kind of look always gave him away. He wasn't a truly experienced criminal. He'd done this before, sure, but he was still afraid of getting caught. Afraid of making a mistake. Afraid of the sound of a siren. Come on, he said. Do it now. Claire breathed. She had no heroic illusions. She knew the goal was to get out alive, not to win. She knew that sometimes handing over the bag was the right thing to do. She knew that no story was worth the trauma. But he also knew how to recognize when someone was trying to build courage on top of a victim who seemed easy prey. She took a short step back, as if obeying, and at the same time, with her right hand, she pressed the car's remote control again, this time holding the button down for longer. The Corolla responded with the alarm. The siren exploded on the concrete like a metallic, repetitive scream, impossible to ignore. The light flashed brightly, reflecting off bumpers and windows. The couple stopped, arguing for a second. The man at the payment machine turned his body. The thief froze. Turn that damn thing off, he growled, taking a half step forward. Claire didn't back down. She leaned forward just enough to appear obedient, but in reality, she was adjusting her angle. If he came closer, she would have space. If he retreated, she would keep her distance. I can't, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Just a little. Controlled fear was her tool. I pressed it accidentally. He looked around again, faster. The light and sound had changed the scenery. Now he wasn't a silent predator. He was a hooded man in bright flashing light, his siren drawing anyone's attention. And yet, he didn't leave. That was what really worried Claire, because the instinct to flee should have already won out. He took another step, much closer. Claire smelled him sweat and something sour, like cheap energy. The hood cast a shadow over his eyes, but she saw his tense jaw, his cracked lips. Do you want to play smart? He said. I have. His hand went into his pocket. Claire didn't wait to find out what was coming. Her body moved with a precision that didn't seem human. It seemed trained. She spun to the side, taking herself out of the direct line of fire, and at the same time raised the paper bag as an improvised shield not to hit, but to create a visual obstacle. The thief blinked, confused, and in that millisecond Claire shifted her weight to her back foot and opened up the distance. Stop, she ordered, in a voice that no longer trembled at all. The command came out clean, short. Authoritarian. He stopped reflexively. An old reflex, from someone who has heard stop before, from someone who could ruin his life. Claire saw it on his face, the micro-expression of surprise. You don't want to do this, she said, now in a low, firm tone. Turn around and leave. Who are you? He spat, trying to regain control. Claire didn't answer, because answers fueled conversation, and conversation fueled closeness. She simply kept her eyes on him, without blinking too much, without looking into his pocket, without giving him the pleasure of knowing where she was focused. The car alarm continued to blare, and now there were footsteps in the distance. Someone had exited the elevator and was coming towards them. Not running, but coming. The thief noticed it too. His breathing changed, as if an invisible pressure was squeezing his chest. I just need the money, he said, and for a moment his voice let slip something almost human, almost fragile. Claire felt a pang in her stomach, not of romantic pity, of reality. She had seen this type of phrase used both as a justification and as a cry for help. Sometimes it was theatrics, sometimes it was the truth, and often it was both at the same time. You're not getting anything here, she replied. You're walking out, now. The man who came out of the elevator slowed his pace, hesitant, as if he realized something was wrong but didn't want to get involved. He raised his cell phone, perhaps to film or call someone. The thief saw this and became more aggressive, not out of courage, but out of desperation. Turn it off, he shouted, and took a quick step toward Claire. That was the mistake. Claire didn't fight. She did what training teaches you to do when someone invades your space. Under unpredictable circumstances, she broke the rhythm from him. A sideways step, his body shifting off axis. and his left hand pushing the bag against his chest with enough force to unbalance him, but not to hurt him. At the same time, his right hand, which held the remote control, used his own body as cover and moved back, seeking support from the concrete pillar. She wanted the pillar because a pillar was protection. A pillar was a boundary. A pillar took away his ability to move around. The thief stumbled a step, recovered quickly, and raised his arm, finally revealing what he had: a small, dark object that could have been a real weapon or a replica. From a distance, and with the flashing light, it was almost impossible to tell the difference. Claire didn't blink. She slowly raised both hands, as if surrendering, but her body remained in position, knees bent, weight evenly distributed, peripheral vision sharp. The car siren pounded against her chest like a drum. Okay, she said, modulating her voice again, more human, less commanding. Calm down, you won. I'll hand it over. The thief breathed harder. A second of triumph, the kind of second that makes someone commit their next mistake. The man in the elevator spoke from a distance. Hey, are you okay? Claire didn't answer him. She didn't take her eyes off the thief. I'm going to get my cell phone, she announced, and slowly rummaged in her jacket, as if searching for the inside pocket. The thief picked up the object, quick. Claire pulled out her phone, but instead of extending it toward him, she turned the screen toward herself for a moment and pressed a short sequence of buttons. 911. Calling. She put it on speakerphone without him noticing. The car siren almost drowned it out, but the operator answered. A 911. What is your emergency? That, even weak, was a presence, a witness. The thief heard something and his eyes widened. Did you call the police? Claire leaned forward slightly, as if to say something personal, intimate, and she spoke softly, with precision. I am not your target. That's when his face truly changed. Not because of the police, but because of his tone. The kind of tone that didn't come from a victim. He looked at her as if he were finally seeing a different person. Who are you? He repeated, and now he seemed less threatening and more frightening. Claire didn't say FBI. Not yet. She didn't need to. Words were tools, and she only used them when it was worth the cost. The thief took a step back. The object trembled in his hand. The flashing light of the car highlighted the sweat on his forehead, the trembling in his fingers. And then, before backing away any further, he said something Claire hadn't expected, something that made the cold of the parking lot feel like it went right down to her bones. I know who you are, he said, his voice breaking. You shouldn't be here. Claire felt the world slow down, because that wasn't the kind of phrase a typical mugger would say. That was a warning, and at the exact moment she tried to read the intention behind those words, the thief turned to run not to the most obvious exit, but to the fire escape at the back. That door that didn't close properly, as if he already knew the way, as if it had been planned beforehand. Claire stood still for half a second, listening to the siren, her own breathing, and the hurried sound of his footsteps fading down the stairs. The operator on speakerphone insisted, Ma'am, are you there? The man from the elevator moved closer, still unsure. Ma'am, are you all right? Has he left? Claire slowly lowered the phone. Her hand was trembling only now, belatedly. Her body always punished her later. I'm fine, she said, in automatic Portuguese, as if she were talking to someone she knew every day, not a witness. Then she corrected herself, in English, to the operator. I'm okay. Suspect fled. Stairwell. B3, Riverside Galleria. She took a deep breath, and for the first time looked at the fire escape door. There was no one else there, but the phrase resonated as if it had been written in concrete. You shouldn't be here. Claire pressed the button, and the alarm finally stopped. The silence that returned was worse, because now the parking lot seemed to hear along with her, and as real sirens began to sound in the distance, she knew with the bitter certainty of someone who has worked on too many cases, that this might not have been a random robbery. Perhaps it was a message, and someone, somewhere, still recognized her. The sirens arrived before the cars, first as a distant echo, then as a concrete presence, invading the parking lot with blue and red light reflecting off the raw concrete. Claire remained where she was, leaning against the pillar, feeling her body finally recognize what had happened. The delay of the shock was almost always like this. It came after everything was over, like a debt collector who shows up when you believe the bill has been paid. She closed her eyes for a second, just one. No more than that. Closing her eyes for too long in an open environment was a habit she had abandoned years ago. "Ma'am," called the man who had stepped out of the elevator. He kept a respectful distance, his cell phone still in his hand, as if unsure whether to get closer or not. "The police are coming. I saw him run." Claire opened her eyes and nodded. "I know. Thank you for staying here." Her voice came out to steady for someone who had just stared at a weapon, real or not. The man seemed to notice this, because he frowned for a moment, assessing her with a kind of cautious curiosity. "Do you want to sit down?" he asked. "There's a bench over there near the elevator." "No," she replied. "I prefer to stand." He didn't insist. Ordinary people can sense when someone doesn't want to be cared for in that way. He simply stepped aside, positioning himself so he could see both the fire escape and the exit ramp, as if he wanted to help without getting in the way. The first two police cars pulled into the parking lot with a quick, decisive stop. 3 officers got out almost simultaneously. One went straight to Claire, the other to spread out, weapons still holstered, but hands ready. "Ma'am, are you the victim?" asked the nearest policewoman, a middle-aged woman with a firm face and her hair tied up in a bun that was too tight to be comfortable. Claire nodded. "He tried to rob me. He escaped through the fire escape, B3. Door that doesn't close properly." The policewoman raised an eyebrow, surprised by the level of detail. "Did you get hurt?" "No." "Did he show a weapon?" Claire thought for half a second before answering. "A dark object. It could be a small firearm or a replica." There wasn't time to confirm. The policewoman exchanged a quick glance with one of her colleagues and spoke into the radio, repeating the description precisely. Claire observed everything without interfering. This wasn't the FBI. It wasn't her jurisdiction. She was just another person involved in an incident. At least, that's what she wanted to believe. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" the policewoman asked. Pulling a small notepad from her pocket, Claire recounted the events, without embellishment, without drama. From the moment she noticed the suspect's presence until his escape, she omitted unnecessary details like adjusting the angle of his body, consciously using the alarm as a distraction because she knew it would sound too strange to someone without training. To the local police, it might raise questions she didn't want to answer. "Did he say anything specific?" the policewoman asked, almost at the end. Claire hesitated for a fraction of a second, too short to be noticed by almost everyone. Almost. "He said he just needed money," she replied. That was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. The policewoman wrote it down and closed the notebook. "We're going to review the security camera footage and try to pinpoint the escape route. A detective will contact you later for follow-up. Do you have someone you can call? Someone who can come pick you up?" Claire shook her head. "I can drive." The policewoman assessed her face for a moment longer than necessary. Perhaps she had seen that expression before. Perhaps not. "If you change your mind, this is the report card number." She handed him a card. "Don't hesitate to call if you remember anything else." Claire took the card, thanked them, and watched as the police officers walked away. One of them went up the fire escape, flashlight in hand. Another stayed behind chatting with the mall security guard, who had arrived too late to make a difference. The elevator man approached again. "I was afraid he'd come back," she said, somewhat awkwardly, "but you handled it better than anyone I've ever seen." Claire forced a short smile. He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press the issue. "Well, if you need a witness, I'll stay here a little longer." "Thank you," she replied, "but I think everything is already settled." He nodded and, after a few seconds of hesitation, stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a hollow sound that echoed louder than it should have. When Claire finally got into the car, the interior felt too small. She closed the door, rested her forehead on the steering wheel for a moment, and took a deep breath. The silence was now real. There were no sirens, no voices, only the smell of warm plastic and her own slowing heart rate. She started the engine. Only then did he allow the sentence to return in its entirety, uncut, unfiltered. "I know who you are." That didn't fit with the rest. It didn't fit with the rush. It didn't fit with the request for money. It didn't fit with the escape through the least obvious staircase. And above all, it didn't suit someone who would have chosen a victim at random. Claire left the parking lot and entered the main avenue. The traffic was light. The city lights were beginning to come on like an organism awakening to the night. People walking on the sidewalks, cars passing by, normal life going on. That was always what bothered her the most. The world didn't stop when something like that happened. At the third traffic light, the phone vibrated in the console. An unknown number. She didn't answer. In the room, it vibrated again. She frowned, but kept her eyes on the street. On the fifth day, the phone rang for the third time. Claire sighed and answered it on speakerphone. Hello? Claire Monroe. The voice on the other end was masculine, low, controlled. You took longer than I expected. She felt her stomach sink. Who is it? He asked, maintaining a neutral tone. Someone still has your number saved, the voice replied, even after you asked for it to be deleted. Claire gripped the steering wheel tighter. If this is a joke. No, it's not, the voice interrupted. And I imagine you're driving now. Riverside Avenue, southbound. The world seemed to shrink. Stop talking, she said, more firmly, now. The parking attendant wasn't good enough, he continued, ignoring the request. But it confirmed one thing, you still react quickly. That's good. It means you haven't lost your touch. Claire took a deep breath. The old training tried to resurface, but she pushed it back down. It wasn't the time to react impulsively. If you know where I am, she said, you know I'm not armed, and you know that threatening me like this is a mistake. There was a brief silence on the other end. You've always been terrible at bluffing, Claire, the voice replied, and I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. Warning about what? Someone is cleaning up loose ends, he said, and your name appeared on a list that should have been buried years ago. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. I left, she said. Officially, legally. I no longer have access to anything. I don't know anything. It doesn't matter, the voice replied. For some people, you never really left. She turned onto a side street, slowing down. Who are you? He asked again. Someone who owes you one, he said, and someone who thinks you're in real danger. Then why didn't you show up in person? Because, unlike you, I've learned how to disappear. The call dropped. Claire stared at the panel for a few seconds, trying to decide if it was real or some kind of elaborate intimidation tactic. But deep down she already knew. The tone of voice, the choice of words, the specific knowledge. This was not improvised. She arrived home 20 minutes later. A low, unassuming building on an unremarkable street. She climbed the stairs, entered the apartment, and locked the door with 2 turns. Then she checked the windows. Everything seemed normal. Claire leaned her back against the door and let her body slide to the floor. Her breath came out shaky now, with no witnesses. She closed her eyes, and then he did something he hadn't done in almost 7 years. He got up, went to the bedroom, pulled out a box hidden at the back of the closet, and opened it. Inside, there were old documents, a switched-off cell phone, an expired ID badge, and a black-covered notebook, worn at the edges. She ran her finger along the cover as if touching something that should have remained buried. Damn it, she muttered to herself. The thief in the parking lot wasn't the beginning. That had been the reminder, and while the city continued indifferently outside, Claire understood that the past she had left behind may never have truly stopped watching her. Claire stayed up all night, not because she was panicking. Panic was disorganization, and she didn't function that way, but because her body had entered an ancient, almost forgotten state, a state in which sleeping meant letting her guard down, and letting her guard down, at that moment, seemed like too costly a mistake. She was sitting at the kitchen table when the sky began to lighten, the cup of coffee already cold in her hands. She hadn't turned on the television. She hadn't put on any music. The silence served a purpose, to hear anything out of place. The apartment was small, functional, chosen precisely for that reason. 1 bedroom, a living room integrated with the kitchen, a bathroom. No luxury, no impressive view, no reason for anyone to observe that place for more than a few seconds. That's what she believed until a few hours ago. Claire got up slowly and went to the living room window. The street was still half empty. A garbage truck was parked on the corner. A man was walking a dog. A car was parked across the street, engine off. Someone inside was using their cell phone. She watched for longer than usual. The car didn't leave. She didn't draw any conclusions. Hasty conclusions were dangerous, but she made a mental note of it. Returning to the kitchen, she opened the box she had taken from the cupboard the night before again. The smell of old paper mixed with cheap plastic brought a strange, almost physical sensation, as if she had reopened a wound that had healed on the outside, but was still sensitive on the inside. The black-covered notebook was exactly as she remembered it. No external markings, no name. Just pages filled with firm, objective handwriting, nothing like an emotional diary. Dates, names, places, short observations. People who had crossed paths on the wrong foot, in investigations that officially never existed. She flipped through the pages until she found a specific one. Larkspur Project. The name leaped out like a restrained punch. Claire closed her notebook for a moment. She took a deep breath. That project had been the beginning of the end. Not officially, of course. Officially, everything had been archived, reclassified, redistributed. But for her, Larkspur had been the point where she realized that some lines weren't just blurred, they were deliberately erased. She started reading again. Illegal wiretaps disguised as international cooperation. Informants discarded when they became inconvenient. A chain of decisions that didn't involve a single clear villain, but a sequence of people protecting positions, reputations, and interests. And in the midst of all this, a name underlined twice. Evan Cole. Claire felt her jaw clench. Evan wasn't a superior. He wasn't a direct subordinate. He was the kind of agent who showed up when something needed to be resolved quickly and under the radar. Intelligent, charismatic when he wanted to be, dangerous when necessary. A man who knew how to move between departments without leaving a trace. And the same man whose voice, on the call the previous night, had been impossible to mistake. She closed the notebook and stared at her own hand on the black cover for a few seconds. Her knuckles were slightly swollen, not from age, but from long use. Repeated use. You never learn, she murmured to herself. Her personal phone vibrated on the table. An unknown number again. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she took her old cell phone out of its box, inserted the charged battery she kept separately, and turned it on. The screen lit up slowly. No modern apps, no social media. A phone made only for making and receiving calls. She typed in a number she hadn't used in years. He called twice. Monroe answered a dry, unsurprised female voice. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. Dana, it's me. The pause was too short to feel natural. I know, Dana replied. You took longer than I thought you would. So he called you too, Claire said. He called, Dana confirmed. In his usual theatrical way. Claire rested her elbow on the table. He mentioned Larkspur. On the other end of the line, the silence was heavier. This isn't good, Dana said finally. Not good at all. I know. You should have stayed out of it, Dana added, without judgment, just stating a fact. I stayed out, Claire replied, until someone decided to pull me back in. Dana sighed. The incident in the parking lot was no coincidence. I know, Claire repeated. The man who tried to rob you, Dana continued, has a strange record. To brief for someone who acts like that. He's not an opportunistic thief. Claire felt her stomach clench. Have you checked his history yet? Not officially, Dana replied. But I know who pulled the trigger. He appeared in old reports as a peripheral asset. People used to test reactions, to provoke responses. Claire stood up from her chair. So it was a test. It was, Dana confirmed. And you passed. Great, Claire murmured. Now everyone knows I still know how to react. Claire, Dana said, in a lower tone. If they're cleaning up loose ends, you're not the final target. You're the path. The sentence hung in the air. What do you mean by that? Claire asked. I mean, Dana replied. Someone wants to know how far you'll go to protect yourself. Claire hung up a few minutes later. Not because I'd run out of things to say, but because we both knew that conversations that went on for too long were traceable, even on supposedly secure lines. She spent the rest of the morning reorganizing the apartment. Not tidying, reorganizing. She changed small habits. She left a light on that she would normally turn off. She put a packed bag near the door. She gathered essential documents. Cash. At 11:40, someone knocked on the door. To beats. Pause. One more. That wasn't the postman's usual behavior, nor the neighbors. Claire stood motionless in the middle of the room. Her right hand slowly slid to the sideboard drawer. Inside, an object she hoped she would never have to touch again. "Claire," a male voice called from the other side of the door. "I know you're there." She recognized the tone immediately. "You shouldn't have come," she said, without approaching. "I know," Evan Cole replied. "But you also know that I never take the safest route." Claire took a deep breath and unlocked the door, just enough to release the security chain. The opening revealed a man older than she remembered, but not frail. His hair was grayer, his face more lined, but his eyes were the same, watchful, assessing, always one step ahead. "You have 5 minutes," she said. Always straightforward, Evan smiled slightly. "I missed that." She opened the door fully and stepped back, keeping her distance. Evan entered as if he already knew the place because he did. He observed details. He always observed. "Someone is dead," he said bluntly. Claire felt the impact, but kept a neutral expression. "Who?" "Mark Ellison," Evan replied. "Found last night. Presumed suicide." The name resonated strongly. "That's a lie," Claire said. "I know," Evan agreed. "You know. And 3 other people know. 2 have already disappeared." Claire crossed her arms. "So why are you here?" Evan looked at her seriously for the first time. "Because the name of the person who pulled the strings behind all this is in your notebook," he said. "And because, like it or not, you're the only one who still connects all the dots." "I left," Claire repeated, now with more force. "Nobody really leaves," Evan replied. "Some just pretend better." The silence that followed was heavy. "They'll come after you again," Evan said. "Not with a thief next time. With something cleaner. Harder to prove." "Then why warn me?" Claire asked. "You always play for the winning side." Evan hesitated. "Just a moment. Because this time," he said, "I think the winning side doesn't care if I go down with them." Claire felt the old sensation return. That dangerous mix of absolute focus and loss of illusions. "If I get involved in this," she said, "there's no turning back." "I know," Evan replied. She walked to the kitchen table, picked up the black-covered notebook, and placed it on the surface. "Then we do it right," Claire said. "Or we don't." Evan looked at the notebook as one might gaze at an ancient weapon. "I knew you hadn't destroyed it." "Some things," Claire replied, "cannot be destroyed. They can only wait." Outside, a car drove by too slowly. Claire realized, and I knew that the time for observing was over. Now, someone was watching back. The car passed by too slowly for it to be a coincidence. Claire said nothing. She didn't point. She didn't make the slightest gesture that would betray any awareness. She simply remained standing beside the kitchen table, her fingers resting on the notebook as if she were thinking about something completely different. Evan, however, noticed the change in her. He always did. "Is someone following you?" she asked in a low voice, without turning her head. "Perhaps," Claire replied. "Or perhaps just someone who's too curious." Evan walked slowly to the window. He didn't press his face against the glass. He stood sideways, using the reflection as a guide. He observed the street for a few seconds. "Dark sedan," he murmured. "Slightly tinted windows. License plate that doesn't match the neighborhood standard." Claire nodded. "It's been parked there since early this morning," she added. "It hasn't moved yet." Evan took a deep breath. "So it has already begun." He stepped away from the window and looked around the apartment as if conducting a tactical assessment, not a tour. He measured distances, evaluated blind spots, and memorized possible exit routes. "You shouldn't be here today," he said. "I know," Claire replied. "But I also know that leaving in a hurry draws attention. To stay as well." "Staying gives me control," she retorted. Evan tilted his head, acknowledging the argument. "They don't want you dead," he said. "Not yet. They want to watch. See who shows up, who you're looking for. That's why the thief," Claire said. "And that's why you." "Exactly." She dropped the notebook and crossed her arms. "Then let's be clear," he said. "You're not here out of altruism. You're here because you're afraid." Evan did not deny it. "I am," he said simply, "because the pattern has changed." Claire approached the window now, but without looking directly out. "Explain." Before Evan began, they would erase specific people. A mistake here, a leak there, always with a plausible justification. Now they're erasing entire stories. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. "Mark Ellison," she murmured. Mark was just the latest, Evan confirmed. He tried to reopen an old channel. Not officially, just asking questions. 2 weeks later, he turns up dead. Depression, according to the report. And what about the other 2 people? One changed her identity in less than 48 hours. The other disappeared. Claire felt a knot forming in her stomach. Larkspur was never closed, she said. It was just buried under enough layers that nobody wanted to dig. Until someone starts digging, Evan finished. They remained silent for a few seconds. Outside, the car started its engine and drove away slowly, as if it had fulfilled its purpose. They confirmed that you're not isolated, Evan said. That's what they wanted. So now comes the second phase, Claire replied. Indirect pressure, Evan confirmed. Nothing that would lead to a clear accusation. Nothing that looks like an attack. Just wear and tear. Claire went to the room and returned with the backpack she had prepared. He opened it on the table and began to calmly and methodically review its contents. Do you still have access to anyone inside? She asked. You, Evan replied. And none that I trust 100%. Me neither, she said. But I know someone who hates that kind of game. Evan raised an eyebrow. Dana. Dana, Claire confirmed. She'll get burned if she gets involved in this, Evan warned. She's already burned, Claire replied. They just haven't admitted it yet. Evan leaned against the kitchen counter. So what's the plan? He asked. Claire zipped up her backpack. First, I disappear for a while, she said. But not completely. They need to feel like they can still see me. Bait, Evan concluded. Observation line, Claire corrected. Bait reacts, I don't. And where do I fit in? Claire stared directly at him. You come in the way you always have, she said. Making connections that nobody admits exist. Evan smiled slightly. You're asking me to go through doors that no longer close. You're already after them, Claire replied. The old telephone vibrated on the table. A short message, no caller ID. They are moving. Don't stay alone, Day. Claire deleted the message without replying. I'm going to spend the night out, Claire said. Neutral place. Nothing connected to me. I know one, Evan said. An old motel near the state highway. No security cameras. Staff who don't ask questions. Perfect. They prepared to leave separately. No going together. No following any patterns. Evan stopped at the door. Claire, he said. If this gets out of control, it's already left, she replied. He nodded and left first. Claire waited exactly 7 minutes before leaving. Not 6. Not 8.7. Enough time to seem random. Outside, the air was colder. She walked to her car without hurrying, got in, and drove without looking back. Only after 3 blocks did she make her first unexpected change of route. The motel was far from the center. A low building, old facade, dim lighting. The kind of place that survived because nobody bothered to notice. Claire parked far from the room. She paid in cash. She didn't give her full name. Inside the room, he did a basic sweep. Nothing suspicious. Still, he placed the chair under the doorknob. An old habit. She sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath for the first time in hours. It was there, in the artificial silence of that room, that something became clear. They weren't trying to find out with Claire was still who she used to be. They were trying to find out how far she would go. And that meant that someone, somewhere, was still afraid of what she could do when pushed too far. The old phone vibrated again. This time, a connection. Speak, she said informally. They pulled up old travel records, Dana said. Yours, from when you were still active. Claire closed her eyes. They are looking for a pattern. Yes, Dana confirmed. And there's one more thing. It says, the man from the parking lot didn't disappear. Claire felt her heart race. Where is he? In formal custody, Dana replied. It's not recorded in any system. Claire stood up immediately. So he wasn't a test, she said. It was a message, Dana replied. And I don't think you've read it all yet. Claire hung up. She stood in the middle of the room, feeling that familiar tension gripping every muscle. Not fear. Preparation. The game had changed again. And now, someone was holding a living piece of the puzzle that had looked her in the eyes that night in the parking lot. Someone who knew who she was. Claire did not sleep at the motel. She lay down, turned off the light, closed her eyes, but her body refused to shut down. It wasn't anxiety. It was continuous calculation. Her mind ran through scenarios like a cog in a machine that had been lubricated after years of being idle. The man from the parking lot hadn't disappeared. That was the detail that changed everything. Informal custody didn't mean imprisonment. It meant control without registration. A legal limbo where people became temporary objects. People kept outside the system so they wouldn't exist on paper, but would exist enough to be used. Claire sat on the bed and picked up her old cell phone. He typed in Evan's number. He called once, twice. "Speak," he replied, his voice low. "They caught the guy," Claire said. "The one from the parking lot." There was a short, heavy pause. "Where?" "Outside the system," Claire replied. "Informal custody." Evan swore under his breath. "Then this is no longer observation," he said. "It's restraint. It's preparation," Claire corrected. Why? Claire remained silent for a few seconds. "To force me to show up." Evan took a deep breath. "They know you don't ignore loose ends." "They know," Claire agreed. "And they know I don't abandon people who were pushed into this situation because of me." "You can't go after him," Evan said. "That's exactly what they want." "I know," Claire replied. "That's why I'm not going after her." "So what's the plan?" Claire stood up and began to walk around the room. "I want to know who's holding him," he said. "Unofficially." "Who pulled that rope?" "This isn't simple," Evan replied. "People who do this sort of thing don't show up on any organizational chart. But there's always someone signing verbal orders," Claire said. "Someone who believes they're protected." "Do you think it's the same name as the notebook?" "I think the notebook's name is above," she replied. "But someone in between is operating now. Someone with enough autonomy to kidnap a civilian without raising an immediate alarm." "That narrows the circle," Evan said thoughtfully. "Considerably." "Exactly." They hung up shortly after. Conversations that lasted too long left traces, even when no one wanted to believe it. Claire left the room before dawn. She left no trace, no receipt other than the money already paid. She drove along back roads to a neutral point, a 24-hour cafe on the edge of town, frequented by truckers and people who didn't ask questions. She sat with her back to the wall, ordered black coffee, and observed. 15 minutes later, Dana came in. She wasn't dressed in office attire. Jeans, a simple jacket, her hair loosely tied back. She looked like someone who was there by chance, but her eyes were too attentive for someone who just wanted coffee. Dana sat down without greeting anyone. "You shouldn't have come," he said. "Neither do you," Claire replied. "They're monitoring cross movements," Dana continued. "Not names, patterns." "Then let's break the pattern," Claire said. Dana stared at her. "You're thinking of doing something stupid." "I'm thinking of doing something necessary," Claire corrected. "They are not the same thing." Claire leaned forward. "Where is he?" Dana hesitated. That said it all. "I don't have the exact location," she said. "But I know who authorized the custody." "Who?" Dana lowered her voice. "Department of Homeland Security, Strategic Analysis Division." Claire felt a chill run through her body. "They have no jurisdiction over that." "Officially, no," Dana replied. "Unofficially, they have carte blanche when they claim a systemic threat." "Is parking lot thieves now a systemic threat?" "No," Dana said. "But you are." Claire leaned back in her chair. "So they're using him as leverage?" "Yes," Dana confirmed. "He's disposable to them, not to you. They know that." "They know," Dana repeated. "And they expect you to try to contact them." "Not directly," Claire said. So how Claire remained silent, organizing her thoughts. "Do you remember when Larkspur almost leaked?" she said. "Before they covered it all up?" Dana nodded slowly. "I remember." "Who handled the technical containment?" Dana frowned. "An external consultant," she began, and then stopped. "No." Claire nodded. "Yes." Dana stood motionless. "He still works as a contractor," Dana said. "Short-term contracts. No direct employment relationship." "Name?" Claire asked. "Thomas Reed." Claire closed her eyes for a moment. "He should be retired." "It should," Dana agreed. "But it isn't. He's the middleman," Claire said. "He holds the guy, reports up, and keeps enough distance to deny everything. If you show up for him," Dana warned, "it becomes confirmation of your interest." "That's why he's going to appear to me," Claire replied. Dana stared at her. "You're planning on being seen." "I'm planning to be controlly vista." Dana sighed. "You never learn." "I learned," Claire said. I just haven't learned how to pretend I don't see. They got up together, but left separately. Hours later, Claire was sitting on a park bench in broad daylight, an open space with children, elderly people, ordinary people. She was exactly where someone would look for her if they wanted to send a message. The old cell phone vibrated. A short message, "You've always liked open spaces." Claire did not respond. 5 minutes later, another one. Bench next to the fountain. "Don't turn around." She sensed the presence before she heard the voice. "You're making a mistake," said Thomas Reed, sitting next to her looking ahead. "I've made worse mistakes," Claire replied. "The parking attendant is none of your business," Reed said. "He made choices." "He did," Claire agreed. "But someone else chose for him afterward." Reed smiled slightly. "You've always had difficulty accepting how the world really works." "No," Claire said. "I've always had trouble pretending that this is acceptable." Reed crossed his hands. "You left, Claire. You requested complete disconnection, protection, anonymity, and I did my part," she replied. "You didn't." "I had no choice," Reed said. "Orders were above me." "There's always a choice," Claire retorted. The silence between them lasted for a few seconds. "He's going to disappear," Reed said. "With or without you here." "Not if I tell you," Claire replied. Reed chuckled softly. "Who do I need to talk to?" Claire turned her face for the first time and stared at him. "With those who still believe Larkspur was just a technical error," she said. "With those who never saw what you helped to hide." Reed's smile vanished. "You have no proof." "I have memories," Claire replied. "And I have people." Reed stood up. "You are putting yourself in danger." "I know," Claire said. "They're not going to stop," Reed added. "Me neither," Claire replied. He walked away without looking back. Claire sat for a few more minutes, feeling the weight of the decision sink in. She had crossed the invisible line. Now it was no longer about observing, surviving, or avoiding. It was about choosing how far to go to prevent the past from continuing to swallow people who never had a chance to understand the game they were played in. The phone vibrated again. This time, a call from Evan. "They moved," he said. "Too fast." "I know," Claire replied. "I forced it." "So now comes the answer." Claire stared at the fountain, at the water cascading continuously, indifferent to everything. "Then we'll endure it," she said. "Until the end." On the other end of the line, Evan remained silent. "This ends badly," he said. "This ends here," Claire replied. "What constitutes evil depends on who's left standing at the end." She hung up, and I knew, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, that there was no going back to being just a woman walking to her car in a parking lot. The system had pulled the rope, and she had decided to pull back. The answer came that same night, not as a direct attack, not as an explicit threat. It came in the way it always did when powerful people wanted to resolve something without leaving a mark. Coordinated silence, closed doors, people who stopped answering the phone. And in the midst of all this, a movement too small to attract the attention of someone who didn't know exactly where to look. Claire was in Evan's apartment when she realized it. A temporary, borrowed place, with too much furniture for someone who was almost never there. She was watching the city through the window when the old phone vibrated. A message. No identification. "He's going to be transferred today." Claire closed her eyes for a moment. "It's now," she said. Evan immediately raised his head. "Who?" "Reed," she replied. "They're going to get the man out of limbo in the parking lot. Clean transfer. No public record." "Where to?" "It doesn't matter," Claire said. "After that, he'll disappear for good." Evan ran his hand over his face. "You provoked enough to force action," he said. "But that also means that now they want to shut it down," Claire added. She opened her backpack and took out something Evan hadn't seen in years. A small, ordinary USB drive to come in to attract attention. "What is that?" he asked. "What's left of Larkspur," Claire replied. "Not raw documents. Not recordings. Connections. That's not admissible evidence," Evan said. "No," Claire agreed. "It's something more dangerous," she explained calmly. "They weren't unique files. They were patterns relevant between names, decisions, fund transfers, operations that never officially intersected, but always ended up benefiting the same circles. Nothing that would bring anyone down on its own. Everything that, together, made it impossible to feign ignorance." "Are you going to hand that over?" Evan asked. No, Claire replied. I'm going, distribute. She had already planned this. 3 different people. No complete trust in any of them. Independent investigative journalism, a federal prosecutor known for being disruptive, and an internal committee that existed more to maintain the appearance of control than to actually control things. If something happens to me, she said, it will come out automatically. Evan stared at her. This is professional suicide. No, Claire replied. It's prolonged survival. He remained silent. And the man? Evan asked. The one from the parking lot. Claire took a deep breath. That's the risk, she said. If I get the timing wrong, he'll disappear. What if you guess right? Then he becomes too inconvenient to disappear. Shortly after midnight, Dana called. They're moving now, she said. 2 unmarked cars. No official escort route. Claire asked. Not yet, Dana replied. But the pattern suggests the Federal Screening Center. Claire closed her eyes. Time? Less than an hour. Claire stood up. I'll show up, she said. Claire, Dana warned, if you are seen near that, they already know I'm in. Claire replied. The difference is as. She hung up before Dana could respond. The sorting building was a block without identity, coldly lit, surrounded by concrete and bureaucratic logic. Claire didn't try to go in. She didn't try to get closer. She did something much simpler. She waited. He waited in the right place, at the right time, where someone who was too alert to feel safe would eventually look. And he looked. Thomas Reed left the building alone, talking on the phone, his face tense. He hadn't expected to see her there. His body betrayed this before his brain reacted. You're insane, he said, approaching quickly. What are you doing here? Making sure you do the right thing, Claire replied. It's too late already. No, she said, not yet. She moved close enough for him to realize that this was no act. The man you detained, she said, if he disappears, this will come out tomorrow. Not as a complaint, as a public question. Reed swallowed hard. You have no jurisdiction. I never needed to, Claire replied. I just need someone upstairs to ask why a civilian was kept out of the system. They're going to deny it, Reed said. Of course they will, Claire agreed. But denying it out loud leaves a record. A record leaves a trail. And a trail leaves a trail of fear. Reed's phone vibrated. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and hung up without saying anything. You don't understand, he said, now more quietly. If I stop this, they'll crush me. If it doesn't lock up, Claire replied, they'll dispose of you anyway, only without making a sound. Reed stood there, trapped between 2 bad certainties. You've always been a problem, he murmured. I know, Claire said, but today I'm a useful problem. Reed closed his eyes for a second. He'll be registered, he said. Officially. No charges. Released after giving his statement. And protected, Claire added. For a short time, Reed replied. Enough time, she said. Reed walked away without looking back. Claire stood there for a few more seconds, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle on her shoulders. It wasn't victory. It was damage control. Hours later, in the morning, Dana called again. He's out, he said. He's alive. Scared, confused. But he's out. Claire sat down slowly. Thank you, she said. This isn't over, Dana warned. I know, Claire replied. But it has changed shape. The news that day didn't talk about her. It didn't talk about Larkspur. It talked about internal reviews, preventive audits, and reevaluated procedures. Nothing concrete. Everything is sufficient. And that was the most the real world allowed. Days later, Claire returned to the Riverside Galleria parking lot. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. He parked the car, walked to the same column, under the same cold light. He stood there for a moment, watching ordinary people come and go, oblivious to what had almost been pulled back to the surface. She took a deep breath. He was no longer an agent. He was no longer invisible. But it wasn't an easy peace either. Claire Monroe returned to her car and drove away, knowing that the past had not been defeated, only kept far enough away that others could breathe. And sometimes, in the real world, that was the best anyone could achieve, and also the minimum acceptable level.